before the sands of time unveiled his legend, humanity believed that Egyptian and Greek works were the oldest literary records, and that the Bible alone carried divine secrets. But in 1872, an astonishing revelation emerged. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest story known today. A narrative that revolutionized literary history and shook mythological and religious beliefs to their core. The Epic of Gilgamesh is the oldest known work of epic literature, predating Homer's Iliad and Odyssey by over 1,500 years. Written in cuneiform script and originating in Mesopotamia, the story follows Gilgamesh, the semi-divine king of Uruk, as he embarks on a profound journey of adventure, friendship, loss, and the search for immortality. Although Gilgamesh was a mythical hero, he also appears in other texts alongside kings who truly existed, shrouding his existence in mystery. The Sumerian King List, dating back to 2100 BCE, records him as the 5th king of Uruk, ruling in the 26th century BCE. His reign was so influential that myths of his superhuman strength, wisdom, and divine heritage arose, elevating him to godlike status. Inscriptions credit him with the construction of Uruk's mighty walls, which in the story are symbolic. They are the tablets upon which he records his quest for the meaning of life. Even later rulers, such as Shulgi of Ur, sought to claim descent from him to bolster their own legitimacy. The historical Gilgamesh eventually merged with legend, becoming a heroic figure venerated across Mesopotamia, appearing in numerous Sumerian poems and prayers long before his tale was unified into a single epic. The epic was likely passed down orally for centuries before being written in Sumerian, and later compiled into a more complete version by the Akkadians and Babylonians. The most well-preserved version was discovered in the ruins of Nineveh, within the library of King Ashurbanipal in the 19th century. The text, attributed to the Babylonian writer Shin-Leqi-un-Nini, represents the standard Babylonian version of the story. However, earlier Sumerian versions of Gilgamesh's adventures existed as individual tales, including Gilgamesh and the Netherworld, Gilgamesh and Humbaba, the death of Gilgamesh, and the flood story. Over time, these narratives were woven together into the complete epic known today. Interestingly, the discovery of the Epic of Gilgamesh had a profound impact on biblical studies, as it revealed that several stories in the Bible, most notably the account of Noah's flood, were influenced by much older Mesopotamian myths. Gilgamesh, known in Sumerian as Bilgames, in Akkadian as Gilgamesh, and later Hellenized as Gilgamos, was believed to be 2/3 divine and 1/3 human. His father was the priest king Lugalbanda, and his mother was Ninsun, a goddess known as the Holy Mother and Great Queen. According to the Sumerian King List, he ruled for 126 years, a lifespan that further mythologized his status. Although he was born of gods but also of men, this destiny sealed his mortality, a fate he would struggle against throughout his journey. His story is one of mystery, action, suspense, adventure, and tragedy, all revolving around one of humanity's greatest questions: death. The Epic of Gilgamesh is ultimately a philosophical journey, making it one of the first literary works to explore existential questions. His quest is not just about conquering enemies or seeking eternal life, but about understanding what it means to be human. His fear of death is deeply psychological, not merely the fear of ceasing to exist, but the fear of meaninglessness. Through his adventures, losses, and failures, he ultimately discovers that true immortality is not achieved by living forever, but through the legacy one leaves behind. His story, much like the Great Walls of Uruk, has stood the test of time, influencing countless myths, religious traditions, and later literary works. This discovery not only revolutionized literary history, but also shook the mythological and religious foundations of the world. In this analysis, every detail of this myth will be examined from different perspectives. Although this is a challenging task to accomplish in a single discussion, every effort will be made to summarize the information while still delivering the most valuable insights in a short amount of time. Welcome to the Epic of Gilgamesh Explained. The Epic of Gilgamesh begins by describing Gilgamesh, the ruler of Uruk, a man of immense strength and intelligence, but also one who rules with unchecked arrogance. He takes what he wants, forces his will upon his people, and even claims the brides of his subjects on their wedding nights. His actions become so unbearable that the gods decide to intervene. To balance him, they create Enkidu, a being of great power who lives among the animals in the wilderness. Enkidu is unaware of human society until he is introduced to it through Shamhat, a temple priestess sent to tame him. After spending time with her, Enkidu undergoes a transformation. His connection to the wild is severed, and he becomes more like a man of Uruk. Gilgamesh is a figure of immense power, yet his story is defined by struggle, transformation, and ultimately, wisdom. As ruler of Uruk, he possesses extraordinary strength and intelligence, but his reign begins with arrogance and oppression. His unique composition of being 2/3 divine and 1/3 human places him between the mortal and the immortal, creating the foundation for his greatest internal conflict, the fear of death and the search for a way to transcend it. Unlike other rulers who simply governed, Gilgamesh embarks on a journey that reshapes his identity and his understanding of existence itself. At the beginning of his story, Gilgamesh is dominated by his ego, believing in his absolute power. The gods, recognizing that he must be humbled, create Enkidu, a being who embodies everything Gilgamesh is not: untamed, instinctual, and uncorrupted by civilization. Enkidu is born in the wild, living among the animals, drinking from the same watering holes, and knowing no master. He represents the natural world, a force untouched by human ambition. His transformation begins when he encounters Shamhat, a temple priestess, who introduces him to human customs. Through her, he experiences physical initiation, pleasure, and the ways of civilization. However, this transition comes at a cost. Once he embraces human society, he loses his connection to the wild. The animals no longer recognize him as one of their own, symbolizing the irrevocable divide between nature and civilization. This transformation is deeply tied to the theme of knowledge and awareness. The act of intimacy with Shamhat is not just a physical initiation, but a metaphysical shift, marking his passage from instinct to understanding. In ancient Near Eastern thought, as seen in both Mesopotamian and biblical traditions, sexual initiation is often linked to the attainment of wisdom. Just as Adam and Eve gained the knowledge of good and evil after eating the forbidden fruit, Enkidu's first experience of sexuality severs him from his previous existence and thrusts him into the human condition. The animals flee from him, and he finds himself altered, his physical strength slightly diminished, but his consciousness expanded. Shamhat serves as both a mother figure and a guide into civilization, offering him food, drink, and clothing, elements that signify his transition into structured society. This act completes Enkidu's transformation, making him a part of the world of humans and setting him on a path that will ultimately lead him to Uruk and to Gilgamesh. When Enkidu arrives in Uruk and learns of Gilgamesh's tyrannical rule, he is enraged and seeks to challenge him. Their confrontation is fierce, but instead of ending in hatred, the battle leads to mutual respect. The people watch as two evenly matched warriors clash, but in the end, Gilgamesh prevails. However, rather than continuing their conflict, they recognize each other as equals and form an unbreakable bond of friendship. Enkidu, who was meant to be Gilgamesh's enemy, becomes his closest companion. In Jungian terms, he represents the shadow, everything that Gilgamesh represses but must acknowledge. Through their friendship, Gilgamesh takes the first step towards self-awareness. In search of fame and glory, Gilgamesh proposes that they embark on a dangerous journey to the cedar forest, where they will defeat Humbaba, the powerful guardian who protects the sacred land. But this is no ordinary forest. The cedar forest is real, located in modern-day Lebanon, and is home to some of the oldest and most revered trees in history. It is also a place of great mystery, one that may have once concealed something far beyond human understanding. According to ancient astronaut theorists, the cedar forest lies near Baalbek, an ancient site associated with divine landings, and possibly one of the most significant locations of the Anunnaki presence on Earth. Baalbek is a place of impossible engineering, home to the Trilithon, 3 stones weighing over 800 tons each, placed with precision beyond what known ancient technology could achieve. Many myths surrounding Baalbek refer to it as the landing place of the gods, a site where the divine descended to interact with mortals. If we accept the possibility that the Anunnaki used Baalbek as a spaceport, then the cedar forest takes on an entirely new significance. It may not have simply been a mythological realm of sacred trees. It may have been a restricted zone, a buffer protecting access to an extraterrestrial installation. And Humbaba? He was not merely a monster, he was a guardian. Although Humbaba has done nothing to provoke them, Gilgamesh believes that killing him will establish his name in history. Yet for Gilgamesh, this is not about securing access to the forest or restoring balance. It is about proving his strength and carving his name into history through an extraordinary feat. He believes that by slaying Humbaba, he will solidify his immortality through fame and reputation. However, he fails to recognize the consequences of his actions. Humbaba's origins are deeply tied to the gods. Tasked with this duty by Enlil, the same god who once sought to wipe out humanity with the Great Flood, Humbaba is more than just a simple adversary. He is a force of nature itself, often thought to embody the power of an erupting volcano. His presence is overwhelming, striking fear into all who hear of him, and even the elders of Uruk warn Gilgamesh against the reckless mission. But this battle is about more than just a physical confrontation. It is a symbolic battle between light and darkness, consciousness and the unknown. The cedar forest itself is more than a physical location. It represents the unknown, the primal, and the subconscious. Throughout human history, forests have been depicted in myth and art as places of deep transformation, where one must confront their fears or inner darkness. A dark, untamed forest often symbolizes the unconscious mind, filled with uncertainty, mystery, and forces beyond human control. Conversely, light within a forest, such as the golden glow of the sun breaking through dense canopies, can represent clarity, wisdom, and enlightenment. This duality is crucial to understanding the battle between Utu Shamash, the sun god, and Humbaba, the forest guardian. Utu Shamash, the god of the sun, represents light, rationality, and divine masculine energy. He is the celestial force that grants vision, allowing humanity to distinguish truth from illusion. As the god of justice, he embodies order and wisdom, standing in opposition to the wild, chaotic, and untamed power of Humbaba. When Shamash aids Gilgamesh and Enkidu in their fight, it is more than just divine intervention. It is a symbolic struggle between light and darkness, civilization and nature, the conscious and the unconscious. Gilgamesh, aligned with Shamash, sees himself as an agent of order, bringing the light of human dominion into the deep unknown. But what he fails to recognize is that some aspects of nature and the unconscious are not meant to be conquered, only understood. Yet there is another layer to Shamash's intervention, one that is often overlooked. Ancient astronaut theorists suggest that when Utu Shamash helped Gilgamesh and Enkidu defeat Humbaba, they witnessed something extraordinary: the departure or arrival of a Shem, a spacecraft of the gods. The descriptions in the Epic of Gilgamesh indicate that Humbaba was struck by terrifying winds and a fiery storm. But was this merely poetic imagery? Or was it a record of an actual technological event, something far beyond the understanding of ancient scribes? If Baalbek was, as some theorists propose, an Anunnaki landing site, then Shamash's intervention could have been more than divine favor. It could have been the use of advanced technology, possibly an energy weapon or aerial strike from a hovering Anunnaki craft. Humbaba, though labeled a demon, is not entirely without humanity. When Gilgamesh and Enkidu, aided by Shamash's firestorm, finally defeat him, he does something unexpected. He begs for mercy. He pleads for his life, offering to serve Gilgamesh faithfully if spared. This moment presents Gilgamesh with a moral dilemma. The wise and just choice would be to show mercy, yet Enkidu urges him to finish the kill. Humbaba, in a final act of insight, warns that Enkidu is not acting solely out of reason. He suggests that Enkidu is afraid, fearing that if Humbaba were to live, he might replace him as Gilgamesh's closest companion. This statement, though made in desperation, offers a surprisingly sharp understanding of the bond between the two warriors and the unspoken tension that exists between them. But despite the warning, Gilgamesh, swayed by Enkidu, delivers the final blow, severing Humbaba's head. In doing so, he ignores another of Humbaba's final words, that killing him will bring down the wrath of Enlil. Enkidu, in his arrogance, assumes they can act before Enlil discovers what they have done, believing they can avoid the consequences. But Humbaba's curse lingers, foreshadowing the disaster that will soon unfold. The gods do not allow such an act to go unanswered. By striking down the guardian of the forest, Gilgamesh and Enkidu do not just anger Enlil. They set in motion a chain of events that will ultimately lead to Enkidu's death and Gilgamesh's descent into despair. The battle against Humbaba is more than a test of strength. It is a lesson in hubris. Gilgamesh and Enkidu, believing themselves untouchable, fail to grasp that their victory is not without cost. What they see as an act of triumph is, in reality, the beginning of their downfall. Shamash, the god of light and wisdom, has helped them defeat a being aligned with darkness. Yet in doing so, they have upset the balance between the divine and the mortal. The moment of victory is fleeting, and the curse of Enlil will soon remind them that no mortal, not even Gilgamesh, can escape the consequences of his actions. The cedar forest, once a realm of mystery, power, and divine presence, has been violated. Its guardian has fallen, and its sacred trees, meant to stand for eternity, are now vulnerable. Just as the light of Shamash revealed the path to victory, it also exposes the harsh reality. Some forces should not be disturbed, and some victories come at too great a cost. Gilgamesh, in his ambition, has unknowingly taken the first step toward his greatest sorrow, proving that while the sun may cast away the shadows of the forest, it cannot erase the darkness that dwells within the human heart. Upon returning to Uruk, Gilgamesh attracts the attention of Inanna Ishtar, the goddess of love, fertility, and war. But she is not just any deity. She is the patron goddess of Uruk, its divine ruler, and the one to whom the city itself is dedicated. The Inanna Temple, the very heart of the city, was not built for Gilgamesh, but for her. As a ruler, Gilgamesh was not only meant to govern Uruk, but to serve its goddess, ensuring that she was honored, worshipped, and obeyed. In the world of ancient Mesopotamia, kings did not rule by their own will. They were subordinate to the gods, acting as intermediaries between the divine and the human realm. Every great city had a god or goddess at its head, and the king was expected to govern in alignment with their divine will. As Gilgamesh prepares to celebrate, Ishtar becomes enamored with him and offers herself to him as a companion. However, he refuses her, citing the fates of her past lovers, many of whom met tragic ends. This rejection is not merely the refusal of a woman's advances. It is an unprecedented act of defiance against the divine order itself. In a world where the gods controlled the fates of men, where cities flourished or fell at their command, Gilgamesh's refusal is an act of rebellion. It is not just the rejection of a goddess, it is the rejection of his own subordination to the gods. Though two-thirds divine himself, Gilgamesh is still mortal, still bound by the cosmic hierarchy that places gods above humans. And yet, in this moment, he places himself above even Ishtar, the very goddess he was supposed to serve. But here's where we must expand our perspective. I firmly believe the Anunnaki were real, flesh and blood entities who once ruled over ancient Mesopotamia. The texts describe them not as myths, but as beings who descended from the sky, governing cities, shaping civilizations, and influencing human affairs. Unlike later religious traditions that portray gods as distant and intangible, the Anunnaki were physically present. Inanna Ishtar, as an Anunnaki ruler, was a powerful entity with access to technology and knowledge beyond human comprehension. She was not simply a goddess. She was a leader, a force, a figure whose influence was both political and cosmic. But while I believe the Anunnaki were real, I do not think we should restrict ourselves to only one perspective. To truly understand these ancient stories, we must amplify our vision. We must integrate multiple layers of interpretation. The Epic of Gilgamesh is more than history, more than mythology, more than a record of extraterrestrial intervention. It is a spiritual, archetypal, and mystical narrative. The rejection of Inanna Ishtar is not just a moment of defiance in human history. It is the archetype of man challenging the divine feminine, of free will confronting fate, of a hero stepping beyond his limitations in pursuit of his own path. Ishtar does not merely offer him love, she offers dominion, power, and divine favor. If he accepts, he will rule Uruk not just as its king, but as the lover of the goddess who controls its fate. But Gilgamesh does something no mortal, no king, has ever done. He mocks her. He recounts the fates of her past lovers, men who were once favored by her but later discarded, cursed, or destroyed. He sees through her offer, recognizing it as a trap. His words are more than rejection, they are blasphemy. He not only refuses her, but shames her in front of the world. This moment is not just the refusal of a goddess, it is the first recorded instance of a human standing against a god. In all mythologies before this, mortals bowed before the divine, obeying without question. But Gilgamesh does not kneel, he does not submit. Instead, he challenges the very cosmic order, breaking the unspoken rule that gods are untouchable. In many ancient cultures, gods were absolute. their will unquestionable. Kings ruled not by their own authority, but as servants of the divine. The pharaohs of Egypt were considered gods themselves. Mesopotamian rulers governed as representatives of their city's patron deity. To defy a god was to defy the structure of reality itself. And yet, in this moment, Gilgamesh dares to place himself above the goddess he was meant to serve. This is more than personal arrogance. It is a turning point in the evolution of human consciousness. For the first time in recorded history, a human asserts his independence from divine rule. This moment reflects the growing awareness of human agency, the idea that mortals can shape their own destiny rather than being at the mercy of the gods. It is the seed of rebellion, the first spark of free will against cosmic hierarchy. Was this a reflection of real societal change? Could this myth represent a shift in the way early civilizations viewed their place in the world? Were humans beginning to see themselves not just as servants of the gods, but as individuals capable of choice, of autonomy, of forging their own paths? Gilgamesh's defiance echoes throughout history, through Prometheus stealing fire from the gods, through Lucifer's rebellion in later traditions, through every myth where humanity steps beyond the boundaries imposed upon them. In rejecting Ishtar, Gilgamesh does not just defy a goddess, he sets the stage for humanity's eternal struggle between submission and self-determination. But in Mesopotamian tradition, to deny a god is to invite destruction. Ishtar is not merely scorned, she is humiliated. As the goddess of war, her fury is just as powerful as her passion. Enraged, she ascends to the heavens and demands retribution from her father, Anu, the sky god. Anu hesitates, recognizing that Gilgamesh's words are not entirely false. Even among the gods, Ishtar's treatment of her lovers is well known. But Ishtar is relentless. She demands that Anu release the bull of heaven, a divine beast whose presence will bring devastation to Uruk. Anu warns her that unleashing the bull will cause 7 years of famine, but Ishtar does not care. She wants vengeance no matter the cost. The bull descends upon Uruk, wreaking havoc, but Gilgamesh and Enkidu stand together against it. The beast wreaks havoc upon the land, but the two heroes work together to slay it. This act should be impossible for mere mortals. But they do not stop there. They mock the gods themselves. Enkidu, in an act of unspeakable blasphemy, tears off one of its legs and hurls it at Ishtar, insulting her further. This is not just defiance, it is an outright assault on the divine. This moment marks a crucial turning point. Until now, Gilgamesh and Enkidu have had the favor of Shamash, the sun god, who guided them in their battle against Humbaba. They have walked the line between divine will and human ambition, acting in ways that, while bold, could still be justified. But this time, they have gone too far. They are not merely rejecting the will of a single god, they are challenging the entire cosmic order. The patron goddess of Uruk has been shamed, a divine beast has been slain, and the heroes parade through the city, believing themselves untouchable. But no mortal, not even a demigod, can escape the judgment of the gods. The divine council convenes, and a terrible sentence is passed. One of them must die. Their power has become too great, their defiance too brazen. Enkidu is chosen. He falls gravely ill, experiencing terrifying visions of the underworld as he slowly withers away. His suffering will be slow and agonizing, a warning to all who dare to challenge the gods. Gilgamesh remains by his side, but nothing can stop his decline. When Enkidu finally dies, Gilgamesh is devastated. He mourns deeply, unable to accept that his closest companion is gone. The slow and painful death of Enkidu shatters Gilgamesh's world. This moment in the narrative is one of the most emotional and devastating in all of mythology. It is not just the death of a hero, it is the death of a brother, a friend, a part of one's very soul. The intensity of grief that Gilgamesh experiences is something that resonates deeply with anyone who has lost someone they love. It reminds one of mourning the death of a friend or family member, of the helplessness that overtakes when watching someone fade before one's eyes, knowing there is nothing that can be done to stop it. Enkidu, once wild and free, now lies powerless. The man who once ran with the animals, who roared against the gods and defied fate, is now trapped in the slow decay of sickness. His suffering is agonizing, not just physically, but spiritually. He curses everything, the forest gate that led to Humbaba, the hunter who first saw him, Shamhat, who introduced him to civilization, and even the gods themselves. His mind is tormented by visions of the underworld, a dark and suffocating place where the dead sit in silence, feeding on dust and clay. He sees himself among them, feathered and ghostly, stripped of all that made him who he was. Gilgamesh, standing by his side, is shattered. He, who once conquered the unconquerable, cannot defeat death. He who once held the power of kings and warriors is powerless against the fading breath of his closest friend. Gilgamesh has never looked at death before. Until now, he has been larger than life, the strongest, the fastest, the hero whose name would last forever. But death is something beyond strength, beyond battle, beyond kingship. And now, for the first time, he understands that no matter how great a man is, he is still destined to die. This moment in the Epic of Gilgamesh reminds me deeply of the story of Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. Like Gilgamesh, Siddhartha was a man who lived in illusion, protected from the harsh realities of life, believing that strength, wealth, and privilege were enough to shield him from suffering. But just as Gilgamesh's world shatters when he watches Enkidu die, Siddhartha's illusion collapses when he first sees sickness, aging, and death. Siddhartha was born a prince, raised in absolute luxury. His father, the king, had heard a prophecy that his son would either become a great ruler or a great spiritual teacher. Wanting to ensure that Siddhartha followed the path of kingship, the king sheltered him from all suffering. He was given the finest clothes, the best food, and endless entertainment. He was surrounded only by youth and beauty, never allowed to see the realities of the world. But one day, Siddhartha ventured beyond the palace walls, and what he saw changed him forever. First, he saw an old man, bent and frail, struggling to walk. This was his first encounter with aging, and he was horrified to learn that this was the fate of all men. Next, he saw a sick man, trembling in pain, suffering from disease. He had never imagined such agony could exist. Then, he saw a dead man, his body cold and lifeless, surrounded by grieving family members. Siddhartha was shaken to his core. How could life be filled with such suffering? How could joy and pleasure exist when everything was destined to decay and die? For the first time, he understood impermanence. No wealth, no power, no pleasure could prevent old age, sickness, and death. Just as Gilgamesh, despite his strength, could not save Enkidu, Siddhartha realized that no matter how great he too would die. And if that was the fate of all beings, then what was the purpose of life? This realization propelled Siddhartha into his own journey. Just as Gilgamesh abandoned his throne in search of immortality, Siddhartha left his palace in search of truth. He wandered the world, seeking wisdom, learning from ascetics, meditating in solitude, starving his body, and pushing himself to the limits of human endurance. But he found no escape from suffering until the day he sat beneath the Bodhi tree and meditated. There, he reached enlightenment and became the Buddha, the awakened one. He realized that suffering comes not from death itself, but from attachment, from the fear of loss, from the illusion that we can hold on to what must inevitably fade. Gilgamesh's story and the Buddha's journey are deeply connected. Both are men who began as powerful figures, believing themselves above suffering. Both are shattered when they witness death for the first time, and both embark on a desperate quest for answers. But where Gilgamesh fights against death, resisting it at every turn, the Buddha accepts it, embraces it, and transcends it. The realization of death sends Gilgamesh spiraling into despair. He tries to bargain, to call upon his mother, the goddess Ninsun, and the elders of Uruk, but no one can change the will of the gods. The gods have spoken, one of them must die, and it is Enkidu. It is a cruel fate, one that seems senseless. The gods, who created Enkidu to balance Gilgamesh, now rip him away. And for what? Because they dared to challenge the gods? Because they killed Humbaba and the Bull of Heaven? What is the meaning of strength, of heroism, of victory, if in the end it is all erased by death? Gilgamesh, unable to accept this, abandons everything. His throne, his city, his power, his identity. None of it matters anymore. He has seen death, and he is afraid. He sets out on a desperate journey, not as a king, but as a man who refuses to accept the fate that awaits him. He searches for Utnapishtim, the one man who has escaped death, hoping to find the secret to eternal life. But deep inside, there is a question that lingers. Is he searching for immortality, or is he simply running from the grief that consumes him? This story is not just about Gilgamesh. It is about all of us. We are all mortal. We are all bound to the same fate. And like Gilgamesh, we too fight against it in our own ways. Through our legacies, through the stories we tell, through the people we love, hoping that somehow a part of us will live on. But in the end, all things fade. This is the hard truth that Gilgamesh must face. His journey takes him through distant lands, across mountains, and to the very edge of the world. Along the way, he meets Siduri, a tavern keeper who advises him to embrace life as it is, rather than chase immortality. She tells him that life's meaning is not in escaping death, but in finding joy in the present. Yet he refuses to listen, believing that without immortality, life is meaningless. Gilgamesh's journey begins in Kuwait, near the heart of ancient Mesopotamia, a land of great city-states where kings ruled under the watchful eyes of the gods. It was from this region, rich in myth and history, that he set out on his desperate quest to find Utnapishtim, the only man to have ever achieved immortality. Leaving behind the familiar world of Uruk, Gilgamesh ventures toward the unknown, moving beyond the lands of men and into the mystical waters that separate mortals from the divine. His first challenge is crossing the Persian Gulf, a vast and treacherous expanse of water that stretches between Mesopotamia and distant mysterious lands. In ancient times, the Persian Gulf was not just a body of water. It was a barrier between civilizations, a threshold beyond which lay the unknown. The peoples of Mesopotamia traded with lands beyond the Gulf, exchanging goods, stories, and possibly even knowledge of otherworldly origins. If Gilgamesh's voyage was real, then this would have been his first step away from the world of humans and toward the domain of the gods. From there, his journey takes him through the Arabian Sea, an expanse of ocean known to ancient sailors who navigated its waters as part of the earliest trade routes. These seas connected Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, and even Africa, creating pathways not only for goods, but also for ideas, myths, and hidden knowledge. Could Gilgamesh have traveled along a route known only to initiates, one leading to a forbidden land? If so, this journey would not have been an ordinary expedition, but a deliberate passage into a realm that few mortals ever dared to approach. Continuing forward, Gilgamesh arrives at the Gulf of Oman and the Red Sea, regions that may correspond to the waters of death that he must cross before reaching his final destination. These waters are described as dangerous and cursed, but could this be an encoded reference to restricted zones, areas forbidden to ordinary men, controlled by an elite power beyond human comprehension? Some scholars and theorists have proposed that the gods, interpreted as the Anunnaki, restricted access to certain areas of the earth, keeping their most advanced knowledge and technology hidden from humankind. Was Gilgamesh attempting to breach one of these zones, to enter a realm where only the gods were permitted to walk? Finally, after surviving the perilous waters, Gilgamesh reaches the Sinai Peninsula, the location of what Zecharia Sitchin identified as the Fourth Region, a forbidden domain controlled by the Anunnaki. In Sitchin's analysis of Sumerian texts, he suggested that Sinai was not an ordinary land, but a site of extreme significance, possibly a landing base or operational center for the gods. The ancient Mesopotamians knew of Sinai's sacred status, and in the later biblical tradition, it remained a place of divine encounter, where gods, or those mistaken for gods, communicated with humans. If Gilgamesh truly journeyed here, then he was not merely seeking wisdom. He was searching for the last of the gods, the survivors of an age long past, beings who had once ruled openly among men and who now remained in isolation. When Gilgamesh finally reaches the farthest edge of the world, beyond the waters of death, he does not find a god or a celestial being awaiting him. Instead, he sees a man, just like himself, one who was once mortal but was granted eternal life. Utnapishtim does not greet him with the answers he seeks, nor does he offer immediate wisdom. Instead, he looks upon Gilgamesh with quiet understanding and asks him why he has come so far, why he looks so broken, and why grief for Enkidu still weighs so heavily upon his soul. Gilgamesh, exhausted and desperate, pours out his sorrow and demands to know the secret of immortality. He has faced every trial, crossed the forbidden waters, and entered the realm of those who have defied death itself. He believes that Utnapishtim holds the knowledge he needs, the answer to transcending the fate that has claimed every mortal before him. But what Utnapishtim tells him is something that shakes the very foundation of his belief system. Utnapishtim does not simply recount how he came to be immortal. He reveals something far greater. He speaks of a time before the world as Gilgamesh knows it, an era when gods and humans coexisted, when divine beings walked among mortals and shaped the fate of civilizations with their own hands. But those days are gone. The gods have withdrawn from the affairs of men, retreating to a higher domain, and the world has been reshaped into something different from what it once was. He tells Gilgamesh that this change did not happen by chance. It was the result of a great catastrophe, an event so destructive that it wiped away the old order. This was the Great Flood, the cataclysm that purged the earth and left behind a new world where humans would never again walk beside the gods as they once had. The tale Utnapishtim recounts is preserved in what is now known as the Flood Tablet, the 11th tablet of the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the most groundbreaking archaeological discoveries in history. This tablet was unearthed in 1872 by George Smith, a self-taught Assyriologist working at the British Museum. As he painstakingly translated the ancient cuneiform text, he realized that he was reading a story strikingly similar to the biblical account of Noah's Ark. Yet this version of the flood was written at least 1,000 years before the book of Genesis. This discovery sent shockwaves through the academic and religious communities. If the Mesopotamian version of the flood predated the biblical account, what did that mean for the origins of the stories found in the Bible? Could the Hebrew flood story have been derived from an earlier source? The implications were profound, challenging long-held beliefs about the uniqueness of the biblical narrative. The similarities between the two flood accounts are undeniable. Utnapishtim, like Noah, is warned of an impending deluge, but in this story, it is not a single god who speaks to him. It is Enki, the god of wisdom, who defies the will of the other gods by ensuring that one human survives. Utnapishtim is instructed to build a massive ark, following precise measurements given to him by Enki, just as Noah follows the divine blueprint in Genesis. He gathers his family, the seeds of all living creatures, and even craftsmen and laborers who assist in the construction. When the storm arrives, it is unlike anything the world has ever seen. Black clouds roll across the sky, lightning splits the heavens, and the very foundations of the earth tremble. For 6 days and 6 nights, the storm rages, drowning everything in its path. Humanity is wiped out, and even the gods themselves, seeing the destruction they have unleashed, are overcome with regret. The goddess Ishtar, who once celebrated human civilization, laments the annihilation of mankind, weeping at the irreversible catastrophe. When the floodwaters finally recede, Utnapishtim's ark comes to rest on a mountaintop. To test whether the earth is dry, he releases a dove, then a swallow, and finally a raven, exactly as Noah does in the biblical account. When the raven does not return, Utnapishtim knows that land has appeared once more. He makes a sacrificial offering to the gods, and they gather around the smoke of the burnt offering, starving and desperate for sustenance, for they have wiped out their own worshippers and now lack the devotion and sacrifices that once sustained them. Realizing the extent of their mistake, the gods grant Utnapishtim and his wife eternal life, making them the only humans to ever escape death. This is where Gilgamesh begins to understand the depth of what has been hidden from mankind. Immortality was not something that humans lost. It was something that the gods deliberately withheld. If this story is not just mythology, but a record of something real, could the flood have actually happened? Scholars and geologists have long debated the possibility that the Great Flood described in multiple ancient traditions was based on an actual historical event. Some researchers suggest that the flooding of the Black Sea around 5600 BCE, caused by rising sea levels, could have been the inspiration for these myths. Others point to massive river floods in Mesopotamia around 3000 BCE, when the Tigris and Euphrates overflowed, devastating early settlements. Still, others propose that these flood stories may be echoes of an even older catastrophe, perhaps caused by comet impacts, massive tsunamis, or drastic shifts in the Earth's climate. The fact that so many cultures, Sumerian, Akkadian, Hebrew, Indian, and even Mesoamerican, share eerily similar flood myths suggests that humanity may have preserved the memory of a real global cataclysm, passing it down through oral traditions for thousands of years. But the greatest mystery remains. Who were the gods that warned Utnapishtim and Noah? If this story was based on real events, were these gods truly divine beings, or could they have been something else entirely? The texts describe the Anunnaki not as abstract deities, but as physical beings who directly influenced human civilization. If the Anunnaki were real, then Enki's intervention in warning Utnapishtim may not have been a divine act of mercy, but a calculated decision to preserve a select group of humans. Was the flood a natural disaster, or was it a deliberate reset, an event engineered to wipe out a corrupt civilization and make way for something new? The discovery of the flood tablet was so profound that it rewrote our understanding of the origins of religious texts, but what happened to the man who found it is just as strange. George Smith, the Assyriologist who first translated the Mesopotamian flood story, would not live long after publishing his findings. In 1876, he published the Chaldean account of Genesis, detailing the Mesopotamian origins of many biblical stories, including the flood narrative. Shortly afterward, while on an expedition to Nineveh to seek out more tablets, he mysteriously died at the age of 36. Official records state that he succumbed to dysentery, but rumors have long persisted that his work was too controversial, that he had uncovered something that powerful forces did not want revealed. Gilgamesh listens to Utnapishtim's tale, but he does not find the answer he was hoping for. The gods did not grant humanity eternal life. When they created mankind, they designed them to die, ensuring that immortality would belong only to the divine. Utnapishtim tells him that no man, no matter how strong or wise, can escape this fate. Everything in the universe is subject to the same law. Things are born, they rise, and they fall. That is the natural order. This revelation is devastating. Gilgamesh has traveled to the edge of the world, crossed the waters of death, and stood before an immortal man, only to be told that his quest is futile. If the gods have truly sealed humanity's fate, then what hope is left for him? Gilgamesh, desperate to escape his own fate, asks how he too can achieve immortality. He expects a hidden secret, a divine formula, a way to cheat death. But what Utnapishtim tells him is far more profound and far more devastating. He tells Gilgamesh a secret of the gods, the ultimate truth that has been hidden from mankind. When the gods created man, they allotted to him death, but life they retained in their own keeping. This revelation changes everything. It is a truth written thousands of years before the Bible, before monotheism, before later religious traditions attempted to explain human mortality. Unlike the idea of a single god creating mankind, this myth tells of a plurality of gods, the Anunnaki, who designed the universe not with man at the center, but with themselves as the sole possessors of eternity. This is not just a myth about a flood. It is a statement about the nature of existence itself. Utnapishtim explains that everything in the universe follows the same cycle: birth, rise, and death. The mountains, the rivers, the stars, the animals, all things live for a time and then fade away. This is the natural order of the cosmos, an order set not by accident, but by the gods themselves. Gilgamesh does not receive the answer he wanted, but he receives the answer he needed. Immortality was never meant for humans. The gods have drawn an unbreakable boundary between themselves and mankind. No strength, no wisdom, no great deed can change this. Death is not a punishment, it is part of the fundamental structure of existence. This is the moment of truth for Gilgamesh. He has traveled beyond the known world, seeking a way to escape death, only to be told that his quest is impossible. And yet, this revelation does not destroy him. It prepares him for the final stage of his journey. Now, with the knowledge of the gods laid bare before him, what will he do with it? Still unwilling to accept this, Gilgamesh is given two final chances. First, he must prove his worth by staying awake for 7 days and nights, but he fails. Then, he is given a magical plant that restores youth. Believing he has finally found the key to eternal life, he sets out to return to Uruk, but as he stops to bathe, a serpent steals the plant, taking away his last hope. The serpent, a universal symbol of transformation and renewal, reinforces the truth that no man can escape the cycle of life and death. With nothing left to pursue, Gilgamesh returns to Uruk. However, he is no longer the same man who left. He now understands that true immortality is not found in living forever, but in the legacy one leaves behind. He looks upon the great walls of Uruk, the very walls he once forced his people to build, and realizes that his achievements, his deeds, and his story will endure long after he is gone. The epic does not end with triumph, but with understanding. From a psychological perspective, Gilgamesh's journey is the process of individuation, the integration of different aspects of the self. He begins as a man ruled by ego, power, and arrogance, but through his trials, he confronts his shadow in Enkidu, his anima in Ishtar, and his ultimate fear of death in Utnapishtim. His quest for literal immortality fails, but he achieves something greater: wisdom. His story endures because it reflects the universal human experience, the struggle with mortality, the search for purpose, and the journey toward self-discovery. A later discovered 12th tablet takes us even deeper into the mysteries of existence, into realms beyond life itself, where the dead dwell in silence and shadows. This final chapter is more than an epilogue. It is an initiation, a descent into the underworld, where the last great truth awaits. Gilgamesh, now carrying the wisdom of his journey, experiences one final loss: the loss of his sacred objects, the puku and miku, symbols of his power, his connection to the gods, and perhaps even his own soul. These objects, once crafted from the divine tree of Inanna, fall into the depths of the netherworld, the land from which nothing returns. His cries of grief are relentless, as if something more than wood and craftsmanship has been taken from him. It is a severance, an omen, and when a hero cries out for something lost, the underworld listens. Enkidu, ever the loyal companion, steps forward to retrieve what has been taken. He is the only one Gilgamesh would trust with such a task, for they are two halves of the same being: Gilgamesh, the conscious mind, the ego that seeks greatness, and Enkidu, the shadow self, the primal force that belongs to the depths of the unconscious. But the underworld is not like the world of the living. It does not obey the laws of kings or warriors. It is governed by silence, by absence, by forces that cannot be defied. Gilgamesh, perhaps already sensing the dangers, offers Enkidu a list of warnings, ritualistic prohibitions that, if broken, will bind him to the realm of the dead. Do not wear fine garments, for they will mark you as foreign. Do not anoint yourself, for the spirits will gather around you. Do not carry a staff, for it will disturb the dead. Do not touch, do not strike, do not speak loudly, for every action in this place has consequences. Yet Enkidu, like all who venture into the unknown with human arrogance, does not heed these warnings. Whether through defiance or forgetfulness, he commits every transgression, marking himself as an outsider, an intruder in a world where no living man belongs. And for this he is taken. The underworld does not send him back. It does not allow him to fulfill his mission. It swallows him whole. In Jungian terms, he is now fully absorbed into the unconscious, into the realm of forgotten memories, lost souls, and unresolved fears. He is the shadow that has been completely consumed, the part of the psyche that sinks so deep it can no longer reach the surface. Gilgamesh, standing in the world of the living, realizes what has happened. He has lost Enkidu for the second time, and this time it is far worse. The underworld is not like mortal death. It is final. It is erasure. It is the place where nothing returns unless the gods will it. And so, for the first time, Gilgamesh is forced to confront not just death, but the fate of the soul after death. His grief is so great that he does something extraordinary. He speaks directly to the gods, demanding justice. He goes before Enlil, the great god of the sky, and pleads for Enkidu's return. But the sky does not listen. He turns to Sin, the moon god, the one who illuminates the night, who watches over dreams and visions. But the moon remains silent. He seeks wisdom from Enki, the god of the deep, the god who once saved Utnapishtim from the flood, and only here does he find an answer. Enki, the keeper of hidden knowledge, commands Nergal, the ruler of the underworld, to open the gates, to allow a single moment of communication between the worlds. And for a brief instant, the dead speak to the living. A hole is opened in the earth, and Enkidu's spirit rises, pale and thin as smoke, no longer the man he once was but a shadow, a voice carried by the wind. This is a sacred moment, an initiation, a forbidden crossing between dimensions that should never touch. In ancient mysticism, to speak with the dead is to bridge the worlds, to gain knowledge that is meant to remain hidden. The living are not meant to know what awaits beyond, for true awareness of death can shatter the mind. Gilgamesh, trembling, asks the question that haunts every human heart. What have you seen? What is the fate of the dead? Enkidu hesitates, for the truth is too terrible to tell. But when pressed, he finally reveals what he has learned. He describes the hierarchy of the afterlife, where those who were honored and remembered find some peace, while those who were abandoned, whose names are no longer spoken, suffer in endless darkness. The spirits who have no one to mourn them, no offerings made in their name, live in misery, eating scraps, forgotten by the world. The greatest tragedy is not death itself. It is to be erased, to exist in a state where no one remembers you, where you are nothing but dust and echoes. This final revelation completes Gilgamesh's journey of self-discovery, but it also transcends it, opening the door to something even more profound. All his life he has sought immortality, believing that only eternal life could bring meaning. But now he understands the truth. The only immortality that matters is to be remembered. The gods did not grant humans eternal life, but they granted them legacy. Stories, names that endure beyond the grave. The true death is not in the body, it is in being forgotten. Yet, in this moment, something else lingers in the air, something deeper than wisdom alone. Gilgamesh has done something no living man should be able to do. He has spoken with the dead. This is more than grief, more than mourning. It is a mystical crossing, a moment where the boundary between life and death dissolves. In the traditions of many ancient cultures, such encounters are not mere visions or hallucinations. They are rituals of knowledge, moments where the living and the dead connect across the veil of existence. But could the underworld have been more than just a spiritual realm? Could it have been an actual location, perhaps a hidden Anunnaki base, an underground civilization, or even a dimensional threshold? Ancient texts often describe gods descending into the depths of the earth, residing in hidden domains beyond human reach. If the Anunnaki were real, could the netherworld have been a concealed installation, a restricted zone where only the initiated could enter? But what if Gilgamesh did not physically travel to a place at all? What if his journey was one of altered consciousness, induced by sacred rituals? Across the world, shamanic traditions have used psychoactive substances, rhythmic drumming, fasting, and deep meditation to transcend ordinary perception and enter spiritual realms. The use of entheogens, such as soma in the Vedic traditions, the ayahuasca of the Amazon, or the blue lotus of ancient Egypt, suggests that many cultures understood altered states as a means of communication with the divine. Did Gilgamesh, in his desperation, undergo such an initiation? Could his journey have been a vision quest, an induced state where he crossed into a liminal space between worlds? If the underworld was not a physical location, but a metaphysical experience, then his encounter with Enkidu's spirit takes on an entirely new meaning. He was not simply traveling. He was shifting between dimensions, entering a realm beyond time and space. Ancient priests, oracles, and mystics have long described similar experiences, entering sacred trances, crossing into the other world, and returning with knowledge from beyond. Was Gilgamesh, in his own way, undergoing the same process? The underworld has many names: the netherworld, Kur, Irkala, but its essence is always the same. It is the land of shadows, a place of silence, where those who have passed linger in a reality separate from the living. And yet, for this brief moment, the dead speak. In myths across civilizations, there are figures who journey into the underworld seeking wisdom. Orpheus descending into Hades, Odysseus calling forth the spirits, the shamans and mystics who speak with ancestors, the prophets who receive messages from beyond. Gilgamesh is now among them. Though his body remains in the land of the living, his soul has crossed over. The underworld is not just a place, it is a state of being, a threshold between one world and another. What does it mean that Enkidu's spirit rises to speak with him? If the dead can answer, if they can whisper the truths of the afterlife, does it not suggest that there is something beyond death? Even though the Epic of Gilgamesh is a meditation on mortality, on the inevitability of human death, it also leaves us with a mystery. If the soul truly vanishes, how does it speak? If Enkidu has been consumed by the underworld, if he is no more than dust, then who is it that rises to meet Gilgamesh? Who is it that shares the fate of the dead? This moment suggests that death is not a complete ending, that there are echoes, traces, spirits, energies that remain. It does not give us certainty, but it leaves us with a door slightly open, a whisper in the dark that says, perhaps the dead are not as far as we think. And this is why Gilgamesh, after all his trials, finally stops seeking immortality. He returns to Uruk, not as the man who set out to defy death, but as the man who now understands it. He has seen both sides, the living and the dead, the world above and the world below. He has touched the veil, and he knows now that what he leaves behind is what truly matters. He looks upon the walls of his city, the walls that will outlive him, the walls that will carry his name through time. And in that moment, he understands. He does not need to live forever. His story will. But perhaps, just perhaps, the dead are never truly gone. Perhaps, in the silence of the night, in the echoes of time, in the whispered names of those who remember, they still speak. There are still other layers we could explore in this story. The mythical journey of Gilgamesh represents the first recorded hero's journey in human history. The hero's journey was studied by Joseph Campbell, Carl Gustav Jung, and others. This journey symbolizes the mythical and mystical path of the psyche and the individual in search of individuation and differentiation, moving from one stage of existence and evolution to another. However, to avoid making this video even longer than it already is, I invite those who are interested to subscribe to the channel, as I plan to explore these ideas further in future videos. There is a movie adaptation of this epic here on the channel, an almost 2-hour dramatization of the Epic of Gilgamesh. I'll leave an access at the end screen of this video, and I highly recommend watching it after this analysis to fully experience this historical account. See you in the next video.